I'm Eva Oh, and this is the Teakink podcast. I've been a dominatrix since 2011, and I would like to spill the tea on my life. Thank you for listening.
In a normal setting, one would do an intro, but it feels very strange because Laura is probably the best interviewer that I know, and so I don't think this should be an interview in any way. But this is Laura Desiree.
Goodness, I would have loved to have heard the interview you would give me, or the intro that you would give me for this.
If I didn't know you, maybe I could, but I know you.
I know.
Yeah,
it's
and
true.
Also, how we met the first time was that you were interviewing me.
We've done this a couple times.
Yes.
I've hosted a couple podcasts over the years. We certainly met during my legacy with Naked News, where yes, we did an interview. So I'm trying to actually let go of that really rigid approach to capturing any kind of content like this, because for me it's sometimes we lose the ability to play, and I get way too focused on the structure. So I'm excited.
What does the structure look like, and what does play look like to you?
Well, structure is a very definite set of rules. So when it came to production, it was always, this is your intro. It's usually 2 to 3 sentences.
Yeah.
We have to be able to cut a promo piece out of that.
Yeah.
And then you've got your target of, say, 5 to 10 questions.
Yeah.
And they need to have clean entries. So we can't be talking on top of each other. Usually with the format, when I was working with Naked News, there was little room for us to run away with a conversation. And so for me, that does feel kind of foreign.
Yeah, so is this weird?
Very. Very.
Would you like to give yourself an intro that is more playful and less structured?
Yeah. We're in Paris right now.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for visiting this wonderful chateau in Paris. My intro, everything's in flux right now. A lot of my atmosphere is changing as I depart from a lot of content creation in the adult sphere and move more into, say, the executive side of things. So I'm kind of undefined at this moment. I'm pursuing an education certificate for sex education, and I'm pursuing my intimacy coordination certification.
These are 2 different things.
Yeah, for film and television. And I'm still pursuing a slew of erotic expression. I'm doing it now by way of a literary experience that we host in Brooklyn, where we read smut aloud to an audience.
Can't wait to actually be able to attend that, but that does sound fun.
I need you in that audience. A big important factor for me in putting that together was that we have a certain societal opinion about erotica, and that being the romance novels about, a gust of wind, caressing a nipple, and it's very perfumey.
Yeah.
And so the content that we read in Eros Unbound, the show that I have now started as a series, we do very explicit, nasty, sort of punk rock stories. A lot of them are confessional, which I love. I love that. It's so sacred to hear people share real lived experiences.
Yeah.
But I also pull from a lot of very infamous authors like Pat Califia, who was never afraid of using rough language. So that to me gives it a real gusto and a real gut punch.
Yeah.
And that's what gets me off.
Is that the first event that you've run on your own?
Yeah.
Amazing. Congratulations. I'm always proud of you.
I can't believe you weren't there for it.
I was, in a way. You know, I've been cheering for a while now.
And you so heavily doubt that in our tech-obsessed world that something like reading erotic literature is going to have any effect. I
Really?
I do anyways. I was fearful of it, thinking, we need, visuals. We need a level of technology that helps get us there. I thought, what if this doesn't work? What if people don't connect with it?
I think with your voice and the voices that you're choosing and how aware you are of how to move an emotion within somebody without the artifice, I don't think you need much more, because not many people have that kind of talent and ability.
Listen, it was such a profound experience.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
It was, witnessing the audience also create their own erotic confessions.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I gave them a writing prompt, because I think it's important to, when you are inspired, to even seize that moment and just try your own hand at it, even if it's a sentence or two. But I did ask the audience in the intermission, take a moment and try to describe what happens when you reach orgasm. Just try. Is it fireworks, or is it something specific like a throbbing in the lower portion of the torso? So I asked them to think like that. And the submissions that we got were phenomenal. One of them that comes to mind is someone just submitted a sea of velvet.
Oh, what a nice one. Mine is definitely not like that.
So in love with it. I'm like, it's so abstract.
Not really. It's textural, isn't it?
A sea of velvet.
Yeah. It's very sensorial. Mine is definitely not that smooth.
However, you and I have had a conversation about, you told me once, and you're allowed to retract this, but you told me once that perhaps the closest depiction of your own experience with orgasm and pleasure was actually in that film, Under the Skin. Under the Skin.
Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily the point of orgasm, but I think the way that the world moves in order for me to get to a sense of pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the most unique tellings of the erotic trance, that idea of sort of dropping into a weightless pool of...
It was a warehouse to me.
It was the warehouse.
I love a warehouse.
Gosh, you really do. That's why you're built for Europe. Those warehouse
Gray
parties.
walls, not like this...
We're coming to you from Versailles today.
But yeah, I'm so proud of you for bringing that together, and I can't wait to see it. And I think it would be a wonderful soundscape for people to listen to also. If you consider making it a podcast or something.
It's amazing that you say that, because there's an element that I have not really shared with audiences or folks considering purchasing a ticket, is that underneath every story, I do have an intentional swelling binaural beat track, because to me there's, voice in open air, which can be very effective, but there's something about the cementing that happens when you turn on binaural beats, a cementing to the ground, a cementing to self. And I put that as a swell underneath the stories. And my goodness, listening to this audience, there was
taken.
They were taken, and they were audible.
I like that word.
Yeah. I like that movie. Right? It was very palpable. And I was in awe. I was really blown away by the night. And it was, we took a lot of risks. We took a lot of chances. The next one's going to be February 15th.
Okay.
So it's a Valentine's hangover.
That's lovely.
But we're looking at something of a monthly residency.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Then I can aim for something.
Absolutely.
Where do you think such a dedication to the erotic came from for you? Or why do you continue it?
I think about this constantly because it seems beyond my control in many ways. It's a calling, like a North Star, to use a really sort of dorky and Hallmark analogy. I've shared in some podcast settings the life of being a twin, which I am, and I'm an identical twin, and you're constantly looking for that piece of identity that sets you apart and really establishes you as an individual. And for me, that was the erotic, and that was sexuality and sensuality. It's not something that I could bring my family along into because, we don't ethically do that. And so it was a solo embrace of self to explore my sexuality. And in fact, most of my 20s was just a lot of wear and tear on experiences within sexuality and my sensual self. And that really permitted me an identity that was different from anyone else in my very small family growing up. And so for me, it colors my world. It's where and how I express myself the most. That's also why I won't do or haven't done full-fledged pornographic content. I love it. I watch it almost every day. But for me, there's this access to myself that I'm protective of, and I wouldn't want it to be influenced by the demands of performance. It's very special and it's mine.
What's the difference between the performance of porn and the performance, say, at your event or just in day-to-day life?
The performance of porn, my goodness, it's entertainment. It's marvelous entertainment. It's so physical. And I think that when cameras are around or when an audience is present, it's almost impossible to not be aware of them. And so you have to ask yourself, how does that affect your expression? How does that affect your ability to drop in completely? And I've always been a performer. I've been on stage and in dance since I was a kid. And so when an audience is present, I will always reserve a small portion of myself to cater to that.
Yeah.
It's just the show person in me.
Yeah.
And so that is a very strict divide. Okay. I mean, have I had sex that's been visible to an audience? Of course. Yeah. You know, I've frequented sex clubs and I've attended those smaller settings, but I don't know if it's something that I would want to bring into my life in like a full-time or even money-motivated element.
And so when, say, you don't have an audience, when do you not have an audience?
You don't have an audience when you are alone with somebody. You don't have an audience when you're alone with yourself. And you aren't factoring in any bit of how they may be receiving you.
Yeah, I kind of feel like even when I'm on my own, I have myself to answer to. That's just how I see the world.
Does that even mean?
There's like two components to me. It's not just me acting, it's me being responsible for what I act.
Do you question some of the embodiment of sensuality, even in a solo session?
Yes, I'm always observing at the very least.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's fascinating.
So I feel like I always have an audience, which I guess is why it's a genuine question.
No, it's the one time that I really let myself, for lack of a better word, get ugly. Yeah. Like really ugly.
Yeah.
And
ugly can also be a beautiful thing to observe.
Completely.
Yeah.
But
that's why I say mine is nothing like velvet.
Right, nothing like a sea of velvet. There were so many. One of them was, another one was an astral projection.
Oh, good for you. Mine is like, it's exactly like that warehouse in Under the Skin, but it's like almost even more of a void, and it's like a scream.
A void and a scream.
It's a scream and a void at the same time. That's probably my version of an orgasm. How would you describe yours?
My first true orgasm made me realize that it's so much more of a roar.
Okay.
You know, I remember very clearly that instance where like you feel how physical it is and how it unfolds. It unfolds in the nervous system. It begins in, you know, for me, it begins in the pleasure center, the area being activated. But it's something that runs like neon and electricity all the way to my fingertips. And then when you think about a wave crashing against rocks, I kind of feel that roll over at the very tip of my fingers. And it comes back into itself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So for you, it's really about seeing the edges of who you are. And
Yeah.
for me, it's like the disappearance of it in a way. Maybe that's why we get along.
That is so beautiful and poetic. I hope that you write that down and share it at the next event. That's beautiful. And
Would you like me to read?
I would love you to read.
I wonder what I would read. Would you give me something to read, or do people read their own stuff?
There's two options.
Okay.
I have an enormous library of especially banned erotica. So for me, that's been like a big passion over the years. And no matter how many times I've moved apartments, I've had to downsize, I've had to, you know, leave things with, you know, exes, I have always taken my entire library with me. Physical books. So it's amazing. I'd never found use for them other than my own solo, you know, pleasure of maybe I'm going to read this passage today or revisit this. But with this project, I've had this like...
Yes, knowledge bank.
My goodness, incredible... Wank bank use of some of these texts. And I find myself, you know, Xeroxing them or trying, because you can't find them online. You can't find them. And, you know, especially with the way that we see, say, America going in the next year or few months even, there is a fear around the accessibility of some of this content.
Book burning.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of banned books enter a list that seems to be ever growing. A lot of it around educational content, which to me is just heartbreaking. I think there's an absolute crisis in America around education, sex education.
Yeah, like I just went to an event yesterday, as I was mentioning to you, and there was a lot of sex educators there, and I wouldn't see myself as an educator, even though that's a term that people tend to use on me for whatever reason. But a lot of them seem to have the same issues that we as sex workers have, getting banned, shadow banned, getting kicked off here, they're unable to monetize this and that. And it's like, I understand the hang-ups that people have around women monetizing their time, you know, and having bodily autonomy. I get that. But in terms of the education side of things, I guess it puzzles me as to why they are also suffering the brunt of it. And I guess you're moving more and more into this edge, this divide. Like, why do you think people are scared of being informed, even in a non-sexy way? And how do we inform from here?
I personally, at this point in my own experience, being a sexual being in, say, America, my own observations, I'm aware of the erotophobia that exists, and it's deeply rooted. As I've been furthering myself in my educator path, I've learned a lot about some of the statistics around like what's being taught in schools. And, you know, we're still teaching abstinence and STDs. They call them STDs still. And how do you brew anything but fear when those are the only two informations that you're giving out, right? Don't have sex because you might get someone pregnant. Don't have sex because you might have a seeping wound that looks like this and you shove it in their faces. And I believe so many of the problems that we see in the society that is America are actually stemmed in our disassociation from sexual education, our inability to grip and grasp sex education. And my dream and my hope is that I can build a comprehensive, compassionate, entirely factual and modern foundational sex education course that is accessible to all people. Because it's not just about the youth. Of course, the youth are the most important. These are people that are, you know, they don't have any experience whatsoever. And how do you begin to tell them what might be in their path? But, you know, I think a lot of people need to rewrite their own understanding.
Or lack of understanding.
That's right. And so I've been starting some lobbying and rallying with some of these platforms. I don't want it to be something like Netflix because, once again, you've got the subscription gate there. But what if it was something like a YouTube where a foundational sex education series could live and people could access this and perhaps set themselves on a different track?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen you always interested in making things understood and for yourself and in others, but I feel like it's become even more and more crystallized lately by the courses that you've been interested in doing. What was the process of that crystallization? Like, how did it come to this point? Or is it something you've been aware of? Is it something that's still forming for you?
It's definitely still forming.
Yeah.
Like,
why are you interested to take these courses?
Working for Naked News, you know, a very tongue-in-cheek, silly, non-serious news program, quote unquote, where we take our clothes off and tell you about the latest cheeseburger fusion dish at Burger King or whatever it might be. Even trying to explain to civilians or folks not involved in any kind of profiting from nudity or sexuality, I realized how much of a resistance there was to validate me in some of the work that I had done and some of the life experience that I come from. And this resistance just reached a boiling point to where I feel like I'm screaming in faces saying, you don't understand the wins that I've had in this life, and you don't understand the road that we've paved. I mean, with the YouTube series Red Umbrella Talk that I did that you were a part of, you know, we were at the Museum of Sex hosting these conversations, bringing curiosities and questions of the general public to actual providers in sex work today. And that was so brave of everyone involved. And I don't know if the civilian world can really comprehend how important even that piece of content is. And so for me, I just, it's not just that I want applause because I'm a triple Aries and I love, being celebrated, but, I think that a lot of people would benefit from confronting the discomfort that they have around sexuality. And so, I entered the program with the Institute of Sexual Education and Enlightenment. They're called IC. And I'm on
just
a path.
A little ambition.
Yeah, I know. I'm on a path to be certified by ASECT, the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists.
Yeah.
And I'm learning a lot about some of the realities of what curriculum looks like and how that trickles out into, grown opinions and some of the paths that folks take. But, more than that, I want to see the opportunity for people to receive the kind of education that I'm having in this path to be an educator. What I'm learning are foundations of sex, and sex is part of our everyday. So for me, it's over the years, it's felt like a real calling, and I can't ignore it.
And to solidify that through education than anything else, I guess. It's like maybe it's also me personally deterred from education or something. I feel like I have also suffered the lack of recognition is a way of saying it, but it's just being shit on, when in actuality you put so much thought into the way that you move through the world.
Yes.
And it's just so glaringly a mismatch of the reality. And I've never been very emotionally attached to society's limitations. I'm very lucky like this. And I guess how I've seen my career evolve, it's like I become more public. I talk a lot of shit to camera.
Yeah, you do.
Or whatever. I try to be available. But I don't know. I see a lot of us moving towards an educator sphere, and I'm just wondering what the trend is with that.
I've thought about, and I've started chatting with folks in sex work that reach a certain level of success, and I've said to them, is it a responsibility to enter activism?
Maybe.
Is it truly? Or do you feel compelled to enter some form of activism because we are aware of how endangered the industry is, and we are aware of how challenging those lives are. And, there's a privilege in reaching a certain level of success that you've been able to establish for yourselves. Is activism a responsibility?
Natural progression.
Right, right. And I think a lot of folks do feel that it is.
Yeah, I guess we just approach it in different ways.
Which is amazing because it can be such lone wolf work.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, whether you're the stripper in a cast of 20 dancers for the night, whether you're a solo full-service provider trying to work in a market that is saturated, whether you're a adult content creator, knowing that your earning potential waivers on subscriptions, waivers on sales. It's amazing that we do still feel
the empathy towards a wider world.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it just goes to share the kinds of people that can gravitate towards this kind of work.
Completely.
Yeah, it takes so much ability to be with other people and their absolute most disgusting selves.
They're most
and our own absolute most
but there's no other bonding like that. I think that bonding is
and
like
it's
so
not
unique.
Disgusting. It's just like really rare that you see these aspects of people, and so we take to claim that it's a disgust or something that we would shun.
But this is why I've said, I feel the civilian world has no idea that, even the greatest FBI interrogator doesn't hold a candle next to, say, a professional like yourself that works on the psychology of humanity. It's just, there is not such a nuanced understanding as someone, say, in your profession. It's you have
skills, but we don't have the textbooks that they probably have.
Right, but what's required is it the experience or the textbooks, It's
a result.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like a certain result.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been fun. But yeah, I think maybe that's a good place. How did that go in terms of your play versus structure? How does that feel? in front of a camera.
I'm already feeling like, my
like-
God, can we redo some takes? And like,
Oh, yeah?
can I take that question back? I'm learning. This is new to me.
I like about 2,000 people per episode per week are listening at the moment, which is pretty nice.
2,000?
Yeah, it'll be more.
Tell your friends.
It'll be more.
Tell your neighbors. Send it to
For
your
me,
family.
I'm pretty amazed by that.
Yeah.
But I think from what I hear from people, it's the fact that they get a little bit of a look. I think people are what is that word? Voyeuristic, of course, but it's also just interesting to hear just the sense of who people are.
Certainly.
And I mean, I write out all of these show notes. I don't know who the hell reads them, but I like to write them out. But I think at the end of the day, it's just about feeling the reality of somebody. And I think you don't have to say anything in a real structure for that to happen.
No, but it's very refreshing to host a conversation like this, because in a world like we're living in currently, where a lot of the podcasting and hosted conversations with, say, the sex work world are dedicated to revealing the most depraved and outrageous realities. It's so refreshing to have a conversation like this, where it's more about the humanity and what drives us and what has made us. And so thank you for doing this work. Like it's giving me hope.
Entertaining myself.
It's giving me hope.
With a little droplet of altruism.
Yes, absolutely.
Just a little bit, because it's mostly about my entertainment. Yeah. I feel like this podcasting format has been an interesting process. I mostly did this because I had a gap in my creativity, and I needed to kind of fill it. Because, it's like we have these like the TV thing.
Yeah, of course.
That sort of like takes so long, and I just
You having a gap in your creativity is rather fascinating to me.
Yeah, why? Because I'm always...
Well, yeah, you're full of inspiration.
It's like time more than anything.
I imagine that you would reach a point where the tank is empty.
Yeah, but it's been an interesting experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to just talk and be and feel ready to share, and then just see what's happening. I guess it would drive you wild to watch how I'm doing this.
Yeah, there's a couple moments where I'm like, okay, do we want to move the camera to get a second shot out of this? Do we want to maybe, obviously I've been so conditioned over years and years of doing these professional broadcasts that for me, like, I love this. I'm terrified of it.
Yeah.
I know that you find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
And
what are you terrified of?
Well, the end result, the substance itself, is it there? Is it not? I've worked on a couple of podcasts over the years with other people where we've debated whether or not we need to enter the recording with a plan or whether you can let it go and see what happens. And I've always been so strict about ensuring substance is included. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm pretentious about the movies that I like, or I'm just a nerd for these things. But I imagine if you have the opportunity to have an audience listening to something, you should make it of substance.
I feel
it's a pressure, though, isn't it?
It depends what you're putting on yourself, because I feel like I think about things enough at a slightly above average level that it's going to have something to be shared anyway. And I don't want it to be too much either, so that it doesn't become too cerebral for people not to be able to hang on to, because I don't do this to come across as cerebral.
But you listen to a lot of philosophy podcasts.
I do. That keeps my brain entertained.
You've turned me on to them, by the way, and I am now devout to about 3 different philosophy podcasts.
Which ones are you listening to?
Philosophy Now. Philosophize This. Philosophy for the People.
Okay.
And another one, Philosophy Now, I think it's just called.
Okay.
I love them so much. I can't stop listening to them. The debates.
Questions.
Yeah, the debates are phenomenal. I mean, the idea of does the English language accurately represent reality?
No, nothing does. Yeah, no language does.
But that's why you get artists like Shakespeare that use the metaphor and the language around, Juliet is the sun and Romeo the moon, I don't know if we'd have the poetry that we do if we had all the words for everything.
No, of course.
Yeah.
With restriction and limitations comes creativity.
See, and as an erotic fan,
Yeah.
I'm happy that we're forced to try
That's
and
kind of
describe
interesting though,
these
right?
inexplicable things like an orgasm, to even try and put words to that.
Yeah.
For me, it's an eternal exercise, and I think it'll always be inspiring. Because how do you begin to try and put words to that?
Yeah. When you mention the limitations and I mentioned the potential creativity, I sometimes think about what would our relationship to sexuality be like, or what would the world look like if we were not working within those limitations?
Yeah.
So, like, would we be... because I think a lot of us are turned on by the fact that it's a challenge.
Yeah, but would we understand each other more?
I think that we would be better off. I don't think it would be as exciting.
That's
But I kind of don't care.
But that's the tragedy for me.
Yeah.
Is that as much as we loathe those feelings of heartbreak or the uncertainty,
Yeah, you kind of like it.
of course I do. You know me. It also keeps it very exciting.
Yeah.
It's what keeps it that, sprinkling of almost a magic of sorts, even when it's a dark magic or a painful magic. It's like the fact that we don't have all the words to express ourselves and we can leave each other on cliffhangers. That's powerful.
Yeah, the play.
Yes.
You
I
are
love
familiar
that.
with the play.
I'm very familiar.
As long as there's no camera.
That's right. See? See?
We're going to turn you off now.
We're going to turn you off now.
I think that's a good like little bit of a taste for you and for them, just to get a sense of what is. And I think we've heard these formalities that you are used to explaining, like the show that you're doing, like the things that you're studying. We have had them in there, but it's also like a little bit more of a sense of how we are, which I think was the most important thing for me.
Sexuality is the biggest learning tool for ourselves and deepening an understanding of ourselves. And so that, to me, is the mission that I'm on, is that you have to investigate it. Okay. You have to investigate it.
So in our next episode with Laura Desiree,
that's right,
we will have her structure.
Oof. Oh, gosh, I'm so excited about that. I've already got it planned out.
But that's the intro that you get for now.
I love it.
So I always end up by saying, thank you for listening. Speak to you next time.